Those stories shortly, but first some breaking news now coming in. WION has accessed a 31-page charge sheet against Paul Manafort and Richard Gates. American authorities have now alleged that Manafort and Gates acted as unregistered agents of the government of Ukraine. They generated tens of millions of dollars in income. Manafort and Gates laundered the money through the U.S. and foreign companies that were directed to a campaign lobby, U.S. officials say, on behalf of the government of Ukraine. In fact, they provided a series of false and misleading bunch of documents to government agencies. All right, we're now joined by WION's correspondent, Aditya Donna, joining us live in the newsroom with the very latest. Aditya, we're just getting our hands on this 31-page indictment. What are you picking up, and certainly troubles for the Trump administration?
Absolutely, Archie. Troubles are growing for the former campaign manager of Donald Trump. This is the indictment. This is the 31-page indictment that has been filed in the district court in Columbia right now. And I'm going to ask my camera person to zoom in and show you some of the operative portions of this particular indictment. It says that Paul Manafort and his aide, Richard Gates III, served for years as political consultants and lobbyists between at least 2006 and 2015. Both of them acted as unregistered agents of government of Ukraine. But what is interesting, however, is what happens in page 2. The page 2, the operative portion says that in furtherance of the scheme, Manafort and Gates funneled millions of dollars in payments into foreign nominee companies and bank accounts opened by them and their accomplices in nominees named and in various foreign countries. So basically, it is a money laundering charge which is being put forward in this particular indictment. It also goes on to say Manafort and Gates concealed from the United States their work as agents of and millions of dollars in payments from Ukraine and its political parties. So there's embezzlement as well being built into this indictment. Further, it also says that Manafort used his hidden overseas wealth to enjoy a lavish lifestyle in the United States without paying taxes on that particular income. And finally, it also says that Gates aided Manafort in obtaining money from these offshore accounts. So obviously there's an element of collusion there being put forward as well. So finally, they embezzled a total of this amount according to the indictment. And it also says Manafort laundered more than 18 million, which was used by him to buy property, goods and services. So there's money laundering, there's embezzlement, and there's concealment from the government of the United States.
Right.
These are the three major charges against Paul Manafort, who served as a campaign manager to Donald Trump in 2016.
Absolutely. And, you know, Aditya, at this point, no word just yet from the White House or administrators from Washington just yet. We certainly understand that lawyers are going to be busy out this morning trying to get out a statement, the legal team perhaps. What type of a political position does this put U.S. President Donald Trump? I mean, he's been in office now for almost a year this January, certainly taking heat from lots of different situations. Now the very latest is former aides dealing with this 12-count indictment.
Well, absolutely. Achal, what is interesting to note here, however, is that Paul Manafort did not serve the Trump campaign for long. He was replaced in the middle. And secondly, this particular indictment that we have for you here is from a special counsel who is investigating the alleged Russian ties to the Trump administration, or rather the Trump campaign. So these two aspects will be looked at once this case comes up for hearing in court. What we do know, however, right now is that Manafort and his aide have surrendered to the FBI. And as investigations proceed, we expect more and more disclosures to come out of this particular investigation.
All right, Aditya, getting us the very latest on this story, tracking the very latest out of Washington, D.C. Aditya, thank you for those updates. All right, moving on to another big story we're tracking for you this hour. A Jet Airways plane made an emergency landing at the Ahmedabad airport in India after a hoax alarm over an attempted hijack on board. The plane was heading from Mumbai to Delhi this morning when it was diverted to Gujarat. 122 passengers and crew were screened. They finally made their way to their destination after a 6-hour delay with air marshals on board. Here's exactly what happened.
The so-called threat note was found in the toilet of the Jet Airways flight on the busiest air route in India, between its financial capital Mumbai and the national capital Delhi. The plane was then mid-air. The printed note in Urdu and English said that the flight had hijackers on board and a bomb in the cargo area, and it should be flown straight to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The flight had left Mumbai at 2:55 in the morning with 115 passengers and 7 crew members. At 3:45 a.m., the flight landed in Ahmedabad, where it was diverted. A Jet Airways spokesperson has confirmed what happened next. The Boeing 737-900 plane was parked at a remote bay. All passengers and crew deplaned by 4:25 a.m. They and their baggage were then screened. All 122 people on board were profiled and their photographs taken. Most importantly, their personal details, including their last overseas visit, was noted. The bomb disposal squad and the local police conducted a thorough search, but no explosive was found on board. The inspection process at the Ahmedabad airport went on for more than 6 hours. After an all-clear from the authorities, the flight finally took off for Delhi. India's Civil Aviation Minister Ashok Gajapati Raju has said the man who kept the threatening note on the plane has been identified as Salla Birju, and he's now been put on the no-fly list. It's the first time that the government has added a person to a no-fly list that India started compiling only last month. Bureau Report, WION.
Well, here's a look at how many hoax calls about bomb threats in Indian flights and airports have been reported in recent years. Hoaxes in India, there have been more than 100 hoax calls that were received in just the last 4 years. In fact, 14 hoax calls were reported in 2014, 34 hoax calls reported in 2015, and the number of hoax calls last year stood at 54. All right, let's go to our guest now joining us to get perspective on this story. We have retired Air Marshal P.S. Ahluwalia joining us now live from New Delhi. Certainly a very scary situation there when it comes to what happened on board that Jet Airways flight. At least the good news, it was a hoax and it wasn't anything more serious, but authorities certainly not taking any chances in diverting that plane. How serious do you think these type of situations are? I mean, we just talked about the numbers in recent years, more than 100 in recent years, hoax calls that have been going out against airlines. Go ahead, sir. All right, we'll try to get our connection back with our guest in a bit, but in the meantime, let's also talk about what Indian carriers have recently done. They've in fact barred 2 lawmakers not too long ago, including Shiv Sena's Ravindra Gaikwad and TDP's Divakar Reddy. The 2 were banned from flying after they apparently misbehaved with airline staff. Gaikwad, in fact, threatened to beat up an Air India employee with his sandals while inside the flight. Reddy, on the other hand, misbehaved with an Indigo airport staff at Vizag. And then this weekend's latest incident adds one more to that list. The top security official says a passenger seated in business class, Salla Birju, confessed to keeping the note to destabilize operations on board. Officials say he, in fact, had created a ruckus in the past as well, saying that there was a cockroach in one of his meals. The note that he left in the aircraft toilet led to that scare on that Jet Airways flight, which threatened to blow up the plane mid-air unless the jet flight was diverted to POK, Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Well, here are some of the implications that you could face if you misbehave on a flight. It could ground you from anywhere from 3 months to lifetime in jail. Well, when it comes to the no-fly list, the rules really vary depending on the situation and the incident. The list has 3 levels for disruptive behaviors with different grounding periods. The first is for unruly physical gestures, verbal harassment, and unruly inebriation. The second level is for physical abuse. The last and the most serious one is for a life-threatening type of situation. All right, let's see if we can bring back our guest into the conversation. We have retired Air Marshal P.S. Ahluwalia joining us now live from New Delhi. Thank you so much for your perspective. Certainly a scary situation on that Jet Airways flight, but also alarming to see how many hoax calls we've had in India in the recent past.
Yes, indeed, it is alarming, but this is not only in India. This is in vogue all parts of the world, and actually, it must be noted that such bomb hoax or explosive hoax, whatever you want to call them, are generally do not have any meaning to it, because these are probably put by some disgruntled elements, or due to some elements that are trying to politicize a particular subject or an issue, that being the objective. And thirdly, of course, it has to be because of radicalization and radical terrorist organizations. I'll start with the last one first, that if it is terrorist organizations, then the bomb will explode. There will be no warnings, it will explode, because the intention is to cause maximum casualties and to advertise the fact that we are terrorists and we want to do this for a certain purpose. But in the case of this Jet Airways flight, you could easily establish that this was a hoax, because there was no, when you get a call or you see a piece of paper over there is no identification. It is just saying that there is a bomb on board,
right,
and you better go to POK instead of going to your destination. So all that you see now, it is up to the captain in flight to take corrective action, and these are procedures, these are standard operating procedures that are already laid down by the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security and the Airports Authority, as also the Indian Air Force. So this was a case where obviously there was no explosive. This could have been planted by a disgruntled element, or it was certainly not a case of any radicalization or terrorist organization doing this.
Right.
So the question is, what do we do? The first thing is you make an assessment of the situation. You make an assessment whether it's realistic or not. However, having said that, whatever the case might be, you have to treat it as if it is going to be an actual explosion. So therefore, what the pilot did, of course, he must have consulted, the corporate on the ground, and which might have obviously indicated to him that you can go and land at the nearest base, which was the right thing to do under the circumstances. And obviously, when they land at, shall we say, at this case, Ahmedabad, then they have to go to a hotspot, what you refer to as a hotspot,
right,
which is far away from the terminal buildings, so that the passengers can be taken off and the full search can be done.
All right.
Of course, the search has to be done on board also, and that is what the cabin crew should have done. So therefore, considering all this, I think it would be very appropriate for us to take steps. There is always counter tactics. These kind of hoax calls, these kind of explosive being planted, terrorist organizations are on the move. They're fluid. Their tactics are fluid. Their intentions are not very clearly discernible. So now it's a question of countering these tactics by what you can do to avoid a bad situation.
Absolutely. All right, let's also take a look at how India deals with these type of hoaxes as opposed to around the world. When it comes to here at home in India, the penalty for hoax callers really varies. As per the DGCA regulations on the national no-fly list, passengers with life-threatening behavior can face anywhere between a 2-year and a lifetime ban to board domestic and international flights. Also, the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security has been seeking stricter punishment, like life in prison for hoax callers, under suppression of unlawful acts against the Safety of Civil Aviation Act. Meanwhile, though, those rules are a little different around the world. So let me ask you again, Mr. Ahluwalia, when it comes to this, is India doing enough to perhaps be strict when it comes to dealing with such type of hoax callers? I mean, ultimately, the big question is why? Is this a cry for attention? Is this perhaps perhaps a prank that went wrong? I mean, what is the motive behind such type of hoax calls?
You see, this is obviously a prank. This is a mischievous person trying to disrupt operations. just you know, so that he can be humored or others can be humored. So therefore, like I explained earlier, that if it is a radical terrorist group, the explosion will occur. And therefore, you have to prevent it by making sure that all the screening checks on the ground are appropriate, and you have to be 3 steps ahead of all these organizations in terms of their tactics. But having said that, you see, it's a overall gamut that you have to take into consideration.
Right.
It could also be hijacking. So the Bureau of Civil Aviation Authority has got absolute clearances, and India was the first organization in the year one of the first in the year 2005. You see what happened in 9/11. 9/11 was actual aircraft being used as missiles,
right,
to go and hit objects on the ground, to go and hit, you know, Pentagon, and of course the Twin Towers that we talked about. The question is, will you have sufficient time for reaction? So India has worked out.
Right.
India has worked out the procedures in conjunction with the Indian Air Force. So if there is very little time, shall we say, for any reaction, we have a procedure, a standard operating procedure in place.
All right. We appreciate your insights and input there. Certainly a scary situation that was luckily avoided thanks to some quick thinking by the flight staff and crew on that Jet Airways flight. Mr. Ahluwalia, thank you for all of those insights and inputs. Well, moving on and sticking to transportation, in a bid to increase road safety across India, the union government has now approved a timeline for the addition of more safety measures when it comes to cars. The move aims to increase road safety and curb the number of deaths because of road accidents. Here are the details.
More than 1.5 lakh people were killed in road accidents in India last year. The number is more than any casualty due to a national disaster or terrorism. Taking note of this staggering statistic, India's Road and Transport Ministry has taken a landmark step in making cars safer. Cars manufactured after July 1st, 2019 must now be equipped with all advanced security features. Airbags, seatbelt reminders, speed alert systems, reverse parking lights are just few of the systems that have to be installed in cars. All new cars will be fitted with a system that issues audio alerts when the speed crosses 80 km per hour. The alert will be sharper when the vehicle crosses 100 km per hour and will be non-stop when it crosses 120 km per hour. In addition to this, a manual override system would ensure ease of exit in case of an electric power failure, disabling the central locking feature and trapping passengers. To reduce the possibility of accidents while parking in reverse gear, a reverse parking alert will alert the driver in case there is an object in the rear monitoring range. But will these safety features help if there is no self-awareness among citizens? Road accidents kill 17 people every hour in India, and yet, despite an auto industry revolution, India does not have a vehicle crash investigation agency. NCAP, which is considered to be the worldwide authority in crash testing and road safety, gave a 0-star rating to major selling cars in India. Bureau Report, WION.
Let's take a look now at some of these stats. Quite alarming. In fact, 17 people are killed every hour in India just last year alone. 55 road accidents occur every hour. New Delhi and Chennai had the maximum accidents. Most of the deaths were because of speeding or people talking on their phones. India's Transportation Ministry says 150,000 people, in fact, died in 2016 in road-related deaths. The fatalities, in fact, went up by 3% from the year before. Last year, speeding accounted for nearly half of those deaths. Now, some of the new road safety features include the Union Ministry adding timelines, which will start July 2019. The parking sensors will also be added in cars. Right now, they're only in luxury vehicles. All the cars that are manufactured from July of 2019 will have airbags, seatbelt reminders, speed alerts, reverse parking alerts, to name a few. All right, to get perspective on this story, we're now going to be joined in by an auto expert from New Delhi. We have Ranojoy Mukherjee to get perspective on the story. Thank you so much for joining us. Certainly a step in the right direction, but could this mean trouble, though, for car makers?
Well, I would not necessarily think that this is trouble for car makers because, you see, most of these features are already available and present with car manufacturers. Now, the point is the cost. The reason they're not there on lower cars is because the cost is too high, and this would increase the cost of cars by, say, another at least 40 to 50,000 rupees per car, and that's quite a large amount for a smaller car. So, personally, I don't think it's a question of giving the features. I think it's a question of working out the monetary side of it and how to do it. I mean, you can't give a low-quality airbag, for example. You know, you're playing with lives here. You cannot have a bad-quality parking sensor or any other this thing. So you cannot compromise on the price of the component.
Right.
But what is important here is that you need to have these features in all cars.
All right, we'll continue the discussion in just a bit, but let's also get the angle about car makers who may have to discontinue production of certain entry-level cars like the Alto. Some of these new safety standards that are being worked on by the Union Road Transport Ministry mandate airbags as well as other safety features, and installing them in more than a decade ago will now add to their price, and this may make it invaluable for them to continue making them, or could it perhaps see the cost go up for the end consumer? Here's the report.
The Union Road Transport Ministry is mandating new safety norms for cars that will come into force by July 2019. Cars will have to be fitted with airbags and seatbelt reminder systems, while light commercial vehicles will require reverse parking sensors. The rules reflect concern over the high road accident rate in India, where more than 80% of mishaps are attributed to drivers. Overspeeding caused over 260,000 accidents, resulting in loss of lives in 61% of cases. But more safety features will add to the price of cars. An increase of 10% means the entry-level Maruti Suzuki Alto or Nano will cost up to 30 to 40,000 Indian rupees more. Experts say production of certain entry-level cars may have to be discontinued. This applies especially to the Maruti Alto and Wagon-R vehicles designed and developed in early 2000. Redesigning old cars is difficult, and car makers may not find it viable to continue them. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, let's now go to Piyush Tiwari, the founder of the Save Life Foundation, joining us now on the story as well. Piyush, when it comes to car makers in India, I mean, this certainly looks like it will help save lives, but how easy is it going to be to implement this? I mean, those numbers are just startling. 17 people killed every hour in India just last year alone, and those numbers seem like they're going up.
Absolutely. This is a welcome step, though, because these had been pending for a very long time. India has consistently scored 0 on global crash testing standards. So this is a welcome step. For the first time, Indian cars or cars manufactured in India and sold in India will have some basic safety standards. The challenge is going to be in establishing crash testing facilities that follow the Bharat New Car Assessment Program, which is the standard that has been set for some of these vehicles to pass safety tests. So setting up facilities, building capacity in them, and most importantly, a grievance redressal mechanism if in case it is found that a certain assembly line or a certain set of cars do not follow these standards, then what are the punishments going to be for it? How will the car companies be prosecuted? Those are going to be challenging. But I have a more fundamental question.
Right.
And my question really is that while this is a great step, and I reiterate that this is a welcome step, 50% of those who are killed in road crashes in India are not in cars. They are on the road. They are the ones who are hit by cars. Another large number of people are killed in bus crashes or crashes involving trucks. What about safety standards of those vehicles? What about the pending visibility standards for bicycles, for example?
Right. So you're saying it's not just for cars, it should be for other vehicles as well, buses, cycles, and other types of transportation, hopefully in the near future.
Most systems.
All right. Of course, we'll love to continue this conversation, but we are out of time on this bulletin. But certainly something to think about when it comes to road safety.